And we are back with yet another workshop from our good friend Russell Coates. So, Russell is going to talk to you today about. We just had the discussion: is it half court defense? Is it half court press? Half court is, in any case, the key word. So that's the goal for today, the topic for today. Um, Let me all remind you again, as usual. Let's make this interactive. Let's share your thoughts. Let's share your ideas as well in the comments here. Russell is going to talk to you about how he sees how to train the half court press. Share his insights on that. If you agree with it or disagree with it, let us know. If you have questions, let us know. Some of these questions we will interrupt Russell with, and for other questions we will keep them to the end. But in any case, the moment you think of a question or a comment, let us know and just type it in the comment section, and that should be fine then. Russell, let's talk half court press.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ernst. Yeah, I would also really enjoy to make this an interactive session. I've got maybe some controversial or specific thoughts about half-court press, half-court defense, and I would like to go through a workshop with you today. Before we start off, I'm going to look at some theory and going to share some of my ideas on how you can set up a half-court defense. And then afterwards, we're going to dive into a training session where I'm going to show you a training session you can use, one that I have used with my team, working on half-court defense. And I've got a few video clips to show you as well. I think, can everyone see my screen already? Yeah.
Yep, there we
Okay.
go.
Great. So before we start off, I would like to discuss a bit about half-court defense. One of the newer terms that is used for a half-court defense is a low block, or if you're going to be very specific, I would say a low to mid block. But I think you can call a half-court press a low block. And basically, it's a defensive structure where the team sets up just behind the halfway line. And in theory, you probably start to engage with the ball carrier somewhere between the 23-yard line and between the halfway line. In international hockey, the low block is starting to gain popularity, and I think one of the most recent famous examples is the EHL final between, I think it was Bloemendaal and the Belgian team. You'll have to
Gantoise.
help me. Gantoise,
Gantoise.
where Bloemendaal, well, I think for the spectator seemed to be completely in control and controlled the tempo of the game. And in the end, Gantoise won quite comfortably. And I think that was a really nice example of how a low block can be utilized. Um, and I think a lot of coaches would say that a half-court defense is a very defensive setup. And I would like to challenge that thought by saying that I think that a half-court defense can actually be quite an offensive way of setting up your team. And I will come into that during the workshop. And I think to summarize, you could say half-court defense is about controlling space and allowing the opponent to build up and to control the central areas and to defend in a compact block. When would you use half-court defense? I think in general, there's a few reasons you can use, and I think there's probably a lot more as well. So I already asked my first question to you guys is when would you, what considerations would you make to set your team up in a half-court defense setup? One of the situations I like to do is when we really want to protect the central spaces of the pitch. Um, Sometimes I've had teams that have been really good in counter-attacking, and I actually find that setting up in a low block helps to utilize the ability to counter-attack than to do high press. Sometimes I use low block when I want to control the tempo of the game. We might be protecting a lead with 10 minutes to go, or we might be very, yeah, slordig is the Dutch word, very very sloppy with ball possession, and I tend to then set my team back a bit deeper in order to control the game, or when they have a really good outlet and I feel like pressing is too risky. Um, if we're playing a team that has a really good aerial or a really good long pass, I tend not to set up in a low block because they can penetrate lines earlier and easier, and they can also find dangerous places in the D with aerial balls. That's something you definitely see happening more often now in the modern game. Or if the defensive team has really strong 1 versus 1 players on the outside and they're really good at eliminating, then I also prefer to defend a bit further from the goal. Some of the main coaching points we're going to be looking at today that are going to be integrated in the training session is protecting the center. So one of the most important things when it comes to half-court press is to close off central passing lanes, because the opponent is already in your half. If they can also easily create vertical connections, then they're going to be finding a lot of circle penetrations. And also keeping the space in front of the circle protected. Another main objective is to guide the ball to the outside and preferably to the right-hand side. But even I would prefer them going over the left-hand side, our left-hand side, than them going through the center. So guiding the ball outside is key. And another important aspect, and that's where, especially in Holland, terminology can be a bit confusing. That's why I like to call it half-court defense and not half-court pressing, because it sounds like half pressing, which is actually not the case. Because as the ball moves to the outside, you want to actually be really aggressive in a press. So that's why I prefer to use a low block or half-court defense, because I feel like if you say low pressing or low block pressing or half-court pressing, it almost insinuates that you're allowing the players to have more time on the ball, whereas half court is only actually a determination of where your pressing line is, but it doesn't actually say anything about the pressing intensity.
Yeah, we've got the first comment here from Bavo, Belgian coach here. So we use the low block to minimize the open spaces and to make press easier, and distances are smaller, making it easier to move quickly.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really fair consideration to make. It can definitely make pressing a bit easier if the distances are smaller, because you've got more margin for error. So sometimes with maybe some younger sides or sides that are still developing their defensive principles, it can be a bit easier to set up in a half-court defense. So I'm just going to show 2 pictures and just share some considerations about how you can set up a half-court defense against a 4-man outlet. So say the opponent is playing a 4-4-3-3 or perhaps even a 4-4-2. I would say the most important consideration you want to have is to try and create a sort of pressing front three. Some teams choose to put the striker a bit deeper and keep the strikers in the central passing lane, and then let the number 10 go towards the side where the ball is played. I prefer to set it up a bit more like this to prevent the running distances from being too big. But it's also if you're setting up in a zonal or a man marking situation. But one of the most important things is that you basically, the player opposing the ball carrier wants to close down the hotline. And the hotline in England, in Holland, is called the bal doellijn, so the ball goal line. There's some different yeah, terminology used, but I quite like the hotline because it's easier to sort of pronounce. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking at in the training session, is how can we coach players to close down the hotline. And other things you want to consider is how can we sort of close off the center. So this area of the pitch is something that we really want to close off, and we want to invite the opponent to play down preferably the left-hand side. So that's where we're going to leave some open space, and sometimes, if necessary, over the right-hand side. If the opponent plays a 3-4-3 or a 3-2-3-2, then There's a few choices you can do. I tend to set up my teams in a man marking setup. So that means we have a free man and we have a press -1. If your team plays zonal, it would maybe look a bit different, but I'm just sharing the way I would set up a half-court defense versus a three-man outlet. As you can see, because you've only got two strikers, it's quite hard to close off the central passing channel if they're standing on the same height. So what I tend to do is angle the two strikers slightly, and the left forward is a bit more forward orientated to try and encourage the ball to go to the left central defender. And one of the most important things is that the free man moves from left to right and he follows the ball. So if this player would to be pass here, this player will move here and try and block. But sometimes a ball might come through, and then the free man is positioned, well, most cases between the midfield and the defender, and to try and protect this line here from balls entering the D, and to also have some extra cover for in case one of their strikers makes a post-up run and starts trying to receive the ball just outside the 23-yard line, and also provide some cover that if they are to pass into a midfielder and he turns the ball away, that you can start to create a double in defense for the midfielders. So that's how I would set it up. I'm interested to see if you guys would do anything different, setting up your team in a half-court defense. So yeah, please feel free to share your comments and ideas about that. So they're just two examples of how I would set up the team. And now we can start moving into the training session. So the first exercise we're going to do is a sort of rondo-based setup. I like starting off with a rondo because it frees up the D. So it means we can maybe do some goalie exercises, or we can do other things, short corners, things like that. So for normally in a training session for the first 10 minutes, I like to get everybody warm, get everyone involved, and start off with a sort of rondo possession based game. So we're going to look at the drill first, and then I'll move into some of the things I look at, variations we can do, and also some coaching topics, or how we can integrate the coaching topics into this session. Just want to... Yeah, just click pause. So it's a setup with two grids. So we have a grid on the right-hand side with 4 players. You can also do this 3 versus 3 versus 3. So you can maybe adjust the numbers according to how many players you have. We've got 2 players here that are trying to win the ball back. So in the grid, there's a numerical underload for the defenders. And we've got 2 players of the same team that are standing on the halfway line. The orange team have to pass the ball 5 times, and then they can transfer to the blue team. The green try and win the ball back. And if they win the ball back, they have 2 options. They can either pass the ball out to one of the green players standing on the halfway line, or they can score in one of the 2 mini goals on the opposing end's team. So it's quite a simple exercise, basically. So the team pass the ball around, there's a transfer, and then one of the teams tries and wins the ball back, and then they can score in one of the 2 mini goals. So things we're going to be looking at here is closing off the central lanes, because the central lane is going to basically be the lane in which teams can transfer the ball to the other side. So that's one of the main objectives. So you want to get your defenders down low. Because they're in a numerical underload, they can't man mark. So they're going to have to stay compact, keep the distances small, so they can support each other and prevent easy passes. And another thing they want to try and do is to guide the ball outside, so that the opposing team plays the ball in a predictable direction, and you can maybe include the 2 players on the halfway line to see if they can do some interceptions. Another thing that is really overlooked when training half-court defense is the transition element. So when you win the ball back in a half court, it's often a very crowded area because the opponent has pushed their team up and you've pushed your team back. And what I quite often see with teams that play half court is that they win the ball back, but quite often they lose the ball quite quickly because they tend to really prioritize vertical progressing, and they end up playing a duel with one of the players on the opposing team. So what I quite like about this exercise is that the players also win the ball back in a crowded area. They are also underloaded when they win the ball back, and they have to have quick decisions